Okay, so there's no implementation accuracy measured or reported in this article. Nowhere does it say that, we checked to make sure that the teacher was providing the social praise that they were supposed to, or was, delivering the amount of prompts for the vocal responses, or that was interrupting the vocal stereotypy in the right time frame. Nowhere does it say that they check those pieces of their implementation to make sure that the intervention was actually being conducted in the way that they intended, which is not uncommon for a lot of these articles. It's just not going to be there. Some of them might, which is great, but a lot of them aren't. So they can't they can't receive a score of 5 for the measurement of the independent variable because this piece is not there. If that piece is not there, then there's no way they could meet any of these other. If they didn't measure implementation accuracy, then they couldn't have done it in 25% of sessions, and they also could not have had IOA for treatment fidelity. They couldn't have been measuring or using an IOA measurement, ensuring that the implementation accuracy, um, between two independent observers was actually being was being measured reliably. So they missed this part. And let's say they did. Let's say the article did talk about implementation accuracy and measured at 80%. They also have to do it, they have to state that they did it for 25, and they also have to state that they had IOA for those measures. If they're missing any piece of these 3 criteria, they cannot get a 5. So let's go to 4. Implementation accuracy measured at 80%? No, they didn't take implementation accuracy measures. So we have to go to 3. Implementation accuracy measured at greater than 80%. Nope, can't have a 3 either because they didn't do that piece. All right, so now we're at 2. The control condition is operationally defined at an inadequate level or better. The experimental procedures are operationally defined at a rudimentary level or better. Implementation accuracy measured at 80%. Oh, there's that again. Can't do it. They can't get that score. They can't get a score of 2. They didn't talk about implementation accuracy. Let's go down. Okay. Control condition operationally defined at an inadequate level or better. Experimental procedures are operationally defined at a rudimentary level or better. IOA and procedural fidelity data are unreported. This part, yeah, it's unreported. Was the control condition operationally defined at an inadequate level or better? Let's look. Okay. This would be, sometimes it would be in the method section. Sometimes they'll actually label it with the independent variable, the intervention for you, so which is nice. So let's see, let's skim through here and they talk about baseline. All right, they're talking about baseline right now. Baseline sessions were 5 minutes in duration. Okay, that's good. Consisted of the student and teacher present in the room with a table, chairs, and no other materials, i.e. no edible items or activities. Okay, good. That's a good, 2 good pieces of a definition of the control. Baseline is always the control. The purpose was to systematically apply, and then they're talking about RID again. Okay. If the student independently vocalized, this teacher delivered praise for using appropriate language and delivered the request if possible. For instance, if he said, I want a tickle, the teacher responded by saying, nice job asking for a tickle. If the child requested an item not available, they would say, nice job asking. There were no programmed responses for vocal stereotypy, and baseline continued for at least 3 sessions and until vocal stereotypy was relatively stable or a deteriorating trend was obtained. Okay, that's the baseline. What do you think? Baseline, same thing as control. Was the baseline/control condition operationally defined at an inadequate level or better? So what do you think? Do you think that the way that they described the baseline, that it was five minutes in duration, they described the exact environment, that there was no other items, there was just a table and chairs, and the teacher, they discussed what the teacher did if the student asked for something that they could have, or asked for something that they couldn't have, and also described that there were no other consequences programmed for vocal stereotypy occurrences. I'd say that's a pretty decent um, operational definition of the baseline condition, of the control condition. So I say they meet this criteria right here. So let's see the experimental. Experimental procedures, which would be the implementation of the independent variable, are operationally defined at a rudimentary level or better. So let's look. This would be in the same category here, or column. Or here we go, it starts right here. RRID was implemented in sessions that resembled baseline and that the teacher delivered praise to the student for using appropriate language and honored requests. However, occurrences of vocal stereotypy were interrupted immediately and redirection to other vocalizations took place. For example, let me give us an example. More specifically, in a neutral tone of voice, the teacher stated the child's name while initiating eye contact and issued the prompts that required a vocal response. The prompts were in the form of social questions for Mitch, Paul, and Nikki. And Alice used vocal imitation. For each child, the vocal demands were skills that were, mastered skills, and they were able to respond fluently. The teacher continued to provide prompts for appropriate language until the student complied with 3 consecutive correct responses in the absence of vocal stereotypy, at which such time the teacher delivered social praise for appropriate language. Super job talking. Furthermore, a session clock that started at the beginning of the session was stopped each time the teacher implemented RIRD and restarted after the teacher delivered social praise following 3 consecutive instances of compliance. The sessions continued until the session clock indicated that 5 minutes had transpired in which the student was not in treatment. That is an excellent operational definition of the experimental procedures, of the actual intervention independent variable that was applied. So it would meet this criteria. Absolutely, 100%, without a doubt. And here, IOA and procedural fidelity data are not reported. Nope, they weren't. So this particular, the measurement of the independent variable for this study gets a rating of 1. So now you have to go and discuss how they could have improved it. So how could they have improved it? Well, let's look at a score of 5 and see what they needed to have done. According to the SMRS rubric, the researchers would need to implement measurement of, or would have to take measurement of implementation accuracy and have that be at 80% or better. They would also have to measure implementation accuracy in over 25% of total sessions. There would also need to be IOA data collected for the treatment fidelity at greater than 80%. That would allow this study to receive a score of 5. So those are the pieces that you need to cover for this assignment. You need to identify the dependent variable, where the data is coming from, what we're actually counting, what we're actually measuring in the study. What's the dependent variable? Where's the data from? Identify the independent variable. What is the treatment? What's the intervention? What is it that I do as a researcher to manipulate? Or what is it that I manipulate in the study? I, independent. We have to decide whether or not they used a test scale or checklist to measure the behavior, or if they used direct behavioral observation, if they measure the behavior of using their eyes, their ears, their, anything like that. Which one did they use? And I'm going to use the criteria in that specific subcolumn. So for this example, the vocal stereotypy was measured using direct behavioral observation. Do I need to concern myself with the protocol being standardized for the measurement of the dependent variable, or that psychometric properties um, and a solid instrument was used, or that the evaluators were blind or independent? Absolutely not. This was not a test. This was not a scale. This was not a checklist. No one was doing an interview. This was direct behavioral observation. I only have to concern myself with these criteria right here. If the measurement of the dependent variable doesn't meet one of these criteria in the rubric for a score of 5, I continue down until I find a score where it meets all of those criteria. It has to meet every single criteria in that area. Same for the independent variable. I have to find out whether or not implementation accuracy was measured. How long was there IOA on it? If it doesn't meet one, it doesn't get that score, and you keep going down until you find one where it meets it. And you're going to discuss this in your paper explicitly. The researchers did not take implementation accuracy measures, therefore they cannot qualify for a rating of a 5, 4, 3, or 2. And you just discuss what they did have. So if they had if they didn't have implementation accuracy measures, but they did, the researchers fully and completely described the control condition in great detail. It was operationally defined at a level far exceeding or more than adequate. The experimental procedures were operationally defined at a more than adequate level. However, the IOA and procedural fidelity data was not reported, so according to the SMRS, it receives a rating of 1. And then you go and you talk about what they need to do to improve that score. If you found that the measurement of the dependent variable received a score below a 4, you also have to provide those recommendations based on the criteria in order to get a score of 5. Okay, I hope that helps. Just email me if you have any other questions.